Best move I ever made was ruining his marriage 5 years ago. He actually believed she was the one lying.
The heavy oak door of Lawrence Blackwood's office stood partially open as Marcus approached, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. He was early for their meeting about the Singapore expansion, but what stopped him cold wasn't the unexpected timing. It was his brother's voice, casual and laughing, floating through the gap. Best move I ever made was ruining his marriage 5 years ago. Marcus froze, his hand suspended inches from the door. The look on Marcus's face when I showed him those doctored photos, priceless. Man never even questioned if they were real. In that moment, the world around Marcus Blackwood, tech mogul, self-made billionaire, man who prided himself on calculated decisions, seemed to fracture and collapse. 5 years of certainty shattered in an instant as he realized what his brother had done and what he himself had lost. Have you ever discovered that something you believed with absolute certainty was built on a lie? That the person you trusted most betrayed you in ways you never imagined possible? 5 years ago, Marcus walked away from his pregnant wife based on evidence his brother fabricated. Today, he's about to face the woman he abandoned and the daughter he's never met. What happens when a man who built his fortune on calculated decisions must confront the one catastrophic choice that cost him everything that mattered? Stay with me to witness a powerful story of betrayal, redemption, and the courage it takes to face the truth. Hi, my beautiful queens. When someone we trusted shatters our world, we face a choice. Vivian could have collapsed when Marcus abandoned her while pregnant, but instead, she transformed pain into purpose, building a business and raising her daughter with dignity. That's our power as women, creating beauty from broken promises. Remember, your worth isn't measured by who walked away, but by how magnificently you rose after the fall. The antique grandfather clock in the corner of Vivian Montgomery's living room chimed 3 times, each resonant note hanging in the air like an accusation. 5 years ago, at precisely this hour, her world had collapsed when Marcus Blackwood, her husband of 8 years and father of her unborn child, had walked out of their home with cold finality in his eyes. "I know what you did," he'd said, his voice eerily calm as he placed his wedding band on the marble countertop. "Don't bother denying it." Now, as Vivian stood in her modest Atlanta townhouse watching the autumn rain streak down her windows, that memory still had the power to hollow her chest. The irony wasn't lost on her. Today marked exactly 5 years since Marcus had abandoned her based on a devastating lie, and today was the day she would finally see him again. Her hand instinctively moved to the silver locket around her neck, the one containing a tiny photo of their daughter Zara, now a precocious 4-year-old with her father's penetrating gray eyes and determined chin. The child he had never met. The child he had refused to believe was his. The doorbell's chime startled her from her reverie. Vivian smoothed her charcoal pencil skirt, a habit from her corporate days that persisted despite the years she'd spent building her own interior design business. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she crossed to the door, each step feeling like she was moving through molasses. When she opened it, the years seemed to collapse between them. Marcus Blackwood stood on her porch, the successful tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist whose face occasionally graced the business section of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. At 42, he was even more handsome than she remembered. His dark hair now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, his tall frame still powerful in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. But it was his eyes that caught her, storm gray and haunted in a way she'd never seen before. Vivian. Her name on his lips after all this time sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Marcus. She stepped back, allowing him entry while maintaining careful distance. "You're punctual as always." He moved past her into the living room, his presence immediately filling the space in a way that made it hard to breathe. His gaze swept over the tasteful furnishings, the evidence of her successful design business, before landing on the collection of framed photographs on the mantel. And there it was, the moment she'd both dreaded and anticipated. Marcus went utterly still as he stared at the central photo of Zara on her 4th birthday. Chocolate cake smeared across her beaming face, dark curls framing features that were unmistakably a blend of them both. "Is that?" His voice faltered, something she'd never heard from the always composed Marcus Blackwood. "Your daughter." Vivian's voice was steady despite the emotion threatening to choke her. Her name is Zara. She'll be 5 in January. Marcus turned to her, his expression a complex mixture of pain, wonder, and something that looked dangerously like hope. She looks like my mother. She has your stubbornness too, Vivian said, unable to keep the slight edge from her voice, and your gift for numbers. Her preschool teacher says she's reading at a 2nd grade level. Marcus moved closer to the photographs, studying each one with an intensity that made Vivian's chest ache. All this time, he whispered, more to himself than to her. Yes, Vivian said simply. All this time, the silence between them stretched, 5 years of absence and pain expanding to fill every corner of the room. Finally, Marcus turned to face her fully. I need to tell you how I found out, he said, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of raw emotion. About Lawrence. About what he did to us. At the mention of Marcus's younger brother, Vivian felt her knees weaken. She sank onto the nearest chair, her fingers gripping the armrests. Tell me. Marcus remained standing, as if too restless to sit, his tall frame taut with tension. It was yesterday afternoon. I went to Lawrence's office to discuss the new Singapore expansion. He's been pushing for a leadership role there. Vivian nodded silently. Lawrence Blackwood had always been the charming, reckless counterpoint to Marcus's disciplined focus. Where Marcus built his fortune through strategic innovation and tireless work, Lawrence had drifted through life on his family name and his brother's generosity. I was supposed to meet him at 3, but I arrived early, Marcus continued, his voice growing harder. His assistant was at lunch, so I went to his office unannounced. The door was partially open. Marcus turned away, staring out the window at the rain, his reflection in the glass showing a muscle working in his jaw. He was on the phone, laughing. I was about to announce myself when I heard him say, "Best move I ever made was ruining his marriage 5 years ago." He actually believed she was the one lying. The best move I ever made was ruining his marriage 5 years ago. Vivian's breath caught. He was talking about me. Marcus nodded, turning back to face her. I froze in the doorway. Then he said, the look on Marcus's face when I showed him those doctored photos. Priceless. Man never even questioned if they were real. Marcus's voice had taken on a hollow quality. He was boasting, Vivian. Boasting to someone about destroying our marriage. What did you do? Vivian asked, trying to imagine the scene. Marcus overhearing his brother's cruel confession, the realization of what had been stolen from him. I stepped into the room, Marcus said, his expression darkening at the memory. Lawrence saw me and went white, dropped the phone, started scrambling with excuses about how I'd misunderstood. He shook his head. But there was no misunderstanding. I heard him clearly. He was proud of what he'd done. Vivian closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the cruel irony. After 5 years of pain and separation, the truth had emerged through a moment of chance. An early arrival, an open door, a brother's boastful indiscretion. I demanded the truth, Marcus continued. All of it. Threatened to remove him from the company completely if he didn't come clean. His expression was grim. It took hours, but he finally admitted everything. How he doctored photos of you entering Richard's apartment building, created fake text messages, even paid a hotel clerk to forge records. But why? The question that had tormented Vivian for 5 years finally escaped. What did he gain from destroying our marriage? Control, Marcus said simply. As long as I had you, had a family of my own, he couldn't manipulate me. Couldn't keep accessing my money, my connections. He looked down at his hands. After I left you, I threw myself into work, expanded internationally, and Lawrence was right there, playing the supportive brother, gradually working his way into positions of influence in my companies. The pieces clicked into place for Vivian. Until you discovered he was embezzling. Marcus's head snapped up. How did you know? Atlanta's business community isn't that large, Marcus. And scandal travels fast. She shrugged slightly. I heard you had him removed from all your companies last year. that there was a settlement requiring his silence. $3 million of company money, Marcus confirmed, siphoned through fake consultancies over 2 years. His expression darkened. I should have pressed charges, but he's your brother, Vivian finished for him. Your only family. Marcus nodded, his gaze drifting back to the photographs of Zara. Or so I thought. If you've ever had your trust betrayed by someone you loved, hit that like button. This story might help you understand that sometimes, the people who hurt us most are fighting battles we know nothing about. The implication hung between them, fragile and uncertain. Before Vivian could respond, her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it, then back at Marcus. My mother's bringing Zara home early. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Marcus straightened, a flash of panic crossing his features. How do I? The sight of the always confident Marcus Blackwood at a loss for words stirred something unexpected in Vivian's chest. For the first time since he'd appeared at her door, she allowed herself to really see him. Not just the man who had broken her heart, but the boy who had grown up without parents, who had raised his troubled younger brother, who had built an empire from nothing through sheer force of will. She knows about you, Vivian said gently. I've never lied to her about who her father is. She has your picture in her room. Marcus's eyes widened. You told her about me? Even after? She deserves to know where she comes from, Vivian said simply. I've told her that her daddy lives far away, building important things that help people. That someday, when the time is right, she'll meet you. Tears gathered in Marcus's eyes, a sight so unexpected that Vivian felt her own throat tighten in response. In 8 years of marriage, she had seen him cry exactly twice. When his grandmother died, and when they'd learned she was pregnant after years of trying. I don't deserve your kindness, he said roughly. It wasn't for you, Vivian replied with honesty. It was for her. As the rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows, Vivian's mind drifted back to the beginning. To the day 8 years ago when everything between them had seemed so full of promise, so untouchable by doubt or betrayal. 8 years ago, the charity gala at the High Museum of Art represented everything Vivian Montgomery had worked toward in her career, recognition, influence, a seat at the table where Atlanta's most powerful decisions were made. As the youngest partner at Montgomery Design Group, the firm her grandmother had founded in 1965, Vivian had fought to be taken seriously in a world that often dismissed her as merely the pretty heir to a family business rather than the Harvard-educated designer whose modern vision was transforming the city's skyline. Tonight, in a midnight blue gown that complemented her warm brown skin, she moved confidently through the crowd, champagne flute in hand, discussing the firm's latest project, the revitalization of a historic neighborhood in West Atlanta, with the city's planning commissioner. The key is preserving the community's character while creating economic opportunity, she was explaining when she felt it. That peculiar sensation of being watched. Glancing over the commissioner's shoulder, she locked eyes with a man standing alone near one of the massive columns that lined the museum's atrium. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders. He made no attempt to hide his interest, holding her gaze with a directness that was both presumptuous and oddly compelling. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, storm gray and intensely focused, as if she were a complex equation he was determined to solve. Excuse me, the commissioner said, following her gaze. Have you not met Marcus Blackwood? He's the reason we're all here tonight. Before Vivian could respond, the commissioner was waving the man over, and suddenly he was standing before her, those remarkable eyes even more striking up close. Marcus, this is Vivian Montgomery of Montgomery Design. Vivian, Marcus Blackwood of Blackwood Technologies. Recognition clicked into place. Of course, the tech wunderkind whose innovative software was revolutionizing urban planning. The self-made millionaire who'd grown up in one of Atlanta's poorest neighborhoods and now donated millions to revitalize similar communities across the country. Ms. Montgomery, he said, his voice a rich baritone that matched his commanding presence. I've admired your work on the East Side Commons project. Your integration of sustainable design with historical preservation is inspired. Vivian raised an eyebrow, surprised by his specific knowledge of her work. "You follow architectural design, Mr. Blackwood?" "I follow excellence," he replied without a hint of flattery in his tone. "In any field." The commissioner excused himself, leaving them alone in the crowded room. For a moment, neither spoke, engaged in a silent assessment that felt strangely intimate. "You're staring," Vivian finally said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'm appreciating," Marcus corrected, his own lips curving slightly. "There's a difference. And what exactly are you appreciating?" "The fact that your reputation doesn't do you justice." Vivian laughed, genuinely amused by his boldness. "And what reputation is that?" "Brilliant, uncompromising, impossible to impress." His eyes held hers. They got 2 out of 3 right. It was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted, a connection that defied the careful boundaries both had built around their lives. Within 6 months, they were married in a small ceremony on Vivian's family estate outside Atlanta, their union celebrated as the perfect merger of old Atlanta tradition and new Atlanta innovation. For 2 years, they were the golden couple, gracing the covers of business magazines and society pages alike. Marcus's tech empire expanded globally, while Vivian's design firm won international acclaim. They built a stunning modern home in Buckhead, traveled the world, and seemed to embody the perfect balance of ambition and partnership. But beneath the glossy surface, fractures were forming, invisible at first, then increasingly impossible to ignore. Marcus's drive, once so attractive to Vivian, began to consume him. 18-hour workdays, missed anniversaries, conversations that revolved entirely around business strategies and investment opportunities. And always, hovering at the edges of their life together, was Lawrence Blackwood, Marcus's younger brother, whose charm masked a bottomless need for his brother's approval, attention, and financial support. "He's family, Vivian," Marcus would say whenever she expressed concern about Lawrence's latest crisis or questionable business venture. "The only blood family I have left. I can't turn my back on him." Vivian understood loyalty. Her own tight-knit family had taught her its value. But something about Lawrence's dependence on Marcus troubled her. The way his eyes followed his brother with a mixture of adoration and resentment. The subtle digs disguised as jokes. The constant reminders of their shared childhood hardships. Always when Marcus was considering cutting back on his support. "He manipulates you," she told Marcus one night after Lawrence had called, drunk and belligerent, demanding money to cover gambling debts. "He knows exactly which buttons to push to keep you feeling responsible for him." "You don't understand," Marcus had replied, his voice tight with an anger rarely directed at her. "You grew up with everything. You never had to watch your little brother go hungry because there wasn't enough food. You never had to steal clothes so he could go to school without being bullied for wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row." The words had stung, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed how little Marcus believed she could understand his world, despite the years they'd shared. The invisible wall between their backgrounds, her family's generations of success, his childhood of desperate poverty, seemed suddenly insurmountable. "You're right," she'd said quietly. "I can't understand what that was like, but I do understand when someone uses your love against you. And that's what Lawrence does, Marcus. Every single time." The argument had ended in a stalemate, as most of their disagreements about Lawrence did. But it had planted a seed of discord that would eventually bear the most bitter fruit. When Vivian discovered she was pregnant after 3 years of marriage, something shifted between them. Marcus, who had always been driven by the future, suddenly became obsessed with creating the perfect present. He cut back his work hours. He attended every doctor's appointment. He converted the home office he'd rarely used into a nursery, personally painting the walls a soft yellow that reminded Vivian of early morning sunlight. "I want our child to have everything I didn't," he told her one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her stomach. Security, certainty, 2 parents who are always there. The vulnerability in his voice had moved her deeply. For the first time, she felt they were truly building something together that transcended their individual ambitions. a family with all the messy, beautiful complexity that entailed. But as Vivian's pregnancy progressed, Lawrence's presence in their lives intensified rather than receded. He began stopping by unannounced, often when Marcus was traveling for business. He called at odd hours with increasingly dramatic emergencies. And most troublingly, he began making subtle comments about Vivian's friendship with Richard Harlow, Marcus's CFO and longtime friend. "Saw you and Richard having lunch at Watershed yesterday," he mentioned casually during a Sunday dinner at their home. "You two seemed pretty intense." Vivian had glanced up from her plate, surprised. "We were discussing the Foundation's new education initiative. Richard's helping me structure the funding." "Of course," Lawrence had replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just looking out for my big brother. You know how people talk." The comment had seemed odd but ultimately harmless, until similar observations began peppering Lawrence's conversations with increasing frequency. Richard's name appearing with deliberate casualness. Innocent questions about Vivian's whereabouts when Marcus was traveling. Small seeds of doubt, expertly planted in fertile ground. What Vivian didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Lawrence was simultaneously working on Marcus, with far more direct insinuations. "I'm worried about Viv," he told Marcus over drinks at the private club they both belonged to. "She seems distracted lately, secretive." "What are you talking about?" Marcus had asked, irritation edging his voice. "She's 6 months pregnant and running both her design firm and our foundation. Of course she's distracted." Lawrence had held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, forget I said anything. I'm sure it's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of a carefully orchestrated campaign to destroy the one relationship that threatened Lawrence's position in his brother's life. Present day. "After I heard Lawrence on the phone," Marcus continued, pulling Vivian back to the present. "After he confessed everything, I went back to my office and pulled out all the evidence he'd given me 5 years ago. Looked at it with fresh eyes." His voice grew hoarse. "The signs were there, Vivian. The inconsistencies. If I hadn't been so blinded by my own insecurities, I would have seen through it." "What do you mean?" Vivian asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "I was always waiting for you to realize you'd made a mistake marrying me." Marcus admitted vulnerability naked on his face. "The boy from Southside Atlanta who clawed his way out. When Lawrence showed me those photos, those texts, it confirmed my deepest fear. That I didn't deserve you. That eventually you would realize that no matter how many millions I made, I wasn't good enough." The raw honesty in his admission stunned her. In their 8 years together, through courtship, marriage, and building a life, Marcus had rarely spoken of his insecurities, of the childhood poverty he'd escaped through sheer determination and brilliance. "That's not fair," Vivian said, rising from her chair. "You never gave me the chance to fight for us. You made the decision alone, just like you always did." The anger she'd suppressed for years flared suddenly. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Being 7 months pregnant and abandoned? Having our friends, our colleagues, our entire social circle wondering what terrible thing I must have done to make Marcus Blackwood walk away." Marcus took a step toward her, stopping when she instinctively backed away. "I spent the night going through everything," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Every photo Lawrence had given me, every text. I even tracked down the hotel clerk. He admitted Lawrence had paid him $5,000 to create false records. He reached into his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope. I brought everything, the original files Lawrence gave me, the proof I've gathered that they were falsified." He placed the envelope on the coffee table between them. "I know it doesn't change what happened, doesn't erase the 5 years I've lost with you, with our daughter, but I needed you to see it, to understand how thoroughly I was deceived." Vivian stared at the envelope, making no move to take it. "Why didn't you just ask me?" The question that had tormented her for 5 years finally escaped. "After 8 years together, how could you believe I would betray you like that without even giving me a chance to defend myself?" "Because I was a fool," Marcus said simply. "A proud, insecure fool who let his brother play on my deepest fears." He shook his head. There's no excuse, Vivian. I failed you in the most fundamental way possible. I failed to trust you. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension between them. Vivian glanced at her watch. Her mother and Zara were early. That's them, she said, moving toward the door. She paused, looking back at Marcus, who had gone completely still, his expression a mixture of terror and longing. Just be gentle, she advised softly. She's shy with strangers at first. The front door opened, and a whirlwind of energy in a purple raincoat exploded into the room. Mommy! Grandma let me feed the ducks, even though it was raining, and one of them tried to eat my boot and… Zara stopped abruptly, finally noticing the stranger sitting in their living room. Her gray eyes, so like her father's, widened as she took in Marcus's presence. For a heartbeat, the resemblance between them was so striking that Vivian felt her breath catch. Hello, Zara said cautiously, moving to press against Vivian's side. Marcus seemed frozen, staring at his daughter as if she were a mirage that might vanish if he moved too suddenly. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle in a way Vivian had almost forgotten he could be. Hello, Zara. My name is Marcus. I'm an old friend of your mother's. Zara studied him with the solemn intensity that always reminded Vivian of Marcus at his most focused. Your voice sounds like the man in Mommy's stories. Marcus's gaze flickered to Vivian in surprise before returning to Zara. What stories are those? The ones about the boy who built towers that touched the sky, Zara replied matter-of-factly. Mommy says they're real stories, not make-believe ones. A look of wonder crossed Marcus's face as he realized Vivian had been keeping his memory alive for their daughter through stories of his rise from poverty to success. It was a gift he clearly hadn't expected. They are real stories, he confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. Would you like to hear more of them sometime? Zara considered this offer with adorable seriousness before nodding. Yes, please. But first, do you want to see my rock collection? I organized it by color and shininess. The simple, childish request seemed to break something open in Marcus. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face and brought back the man Vivian had fallen in love with years ago. I would love to see your rock collection, he said, kneeling to Zara's level. I used to collect rocks when I was a boy. Really? Zara's eyes widened with delight at finding a kindred spirit. Did you have any that sparkled? A few, Marcus said, his voice warm with remembered joy. I found a piece of quartz once that caught the sunlight like it had stars inside. I have one like that, Zara exclaimed, grabbing his hand without hesitation. Come see. As Zara tugged Marcus toward her bedroom, Vivian exchanged a glance with her mother, who had been watching the interaction with knowing eyes. Josephine Montgomery had never spoken ill of Marcus, even after he'd abandoned her pregnant daughter. She'd simply been there, a pillar of strength when Vivian needed it most. So he finally learned the truth, Josephine said quietly, hanging her raincoat by the door. Vivian nodded, watching as Marcus allowed himself to be led away by the daughter he was meeting for the first time. Yesterday, Lawrence was bragging about it on the phone, and Marcus overheard. Josephine shook her head, disgust evident in her expression. That man always was poison. Even when you were first dating Marcus, I could see how Lawrence resented your relationship. I know, Mama, Vivian sighed. You tried to warn me. Not about Marcus, Josephine clarified. He's a good man who made a terrible mistake. I warned you about Lawrence. She squeezed Vivian's hand. What happens now? Vivian looked toward Zara's bedroom, where she could hear her daughter's excited voice explaining her classification system for rocks and minerals. I don't know, she admitted. 5 years is a long time. We're different people now. But some things don't change, her mother observed gently. The way he looked at you just now, that hasn't changed. Before Vivian could respond, her phone rang. Glancing at the screen, she frowned at the unfamiliar number. I should take this. It might be a client. Josephine nodded, moving toward the kitchen. I'll make some tea. Sounds like we all might need it. Vivian answered the call, stepping onto the front porch for privacy. Vivian Montgomery speaking. Ms. Montgomery. The voice was male, unfamiliar, and strained. This is Lawrence Blackwood. Vivian's hand tightened on the phone, her body going rigid. I have nothing to say to you. Please. Lawrence's voice held none of the smooth charm she remembered. I know Marcus is there. I know he told you everything. But you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Vivian cut him off, her voice low and controlled despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. You destroyed my marriage. You made your brother believe I was unfaithful. You robbed my daughter of her father for 5 years. What could you possibly say that would matter now? He'll destroy me, Lawrence said, desperation evident in every word. You don't know what he's capable of when he feels betrayed. He's already frozen my accounts, locked me out of the company. I have nothing left. The irony of his words wasn't lost on Vivian. So you're calling me for what? Sympathy? Intervention? I'm calling to warn you, Lawrence replied, his voice hardening. Marcus isn't the saint you think he is. He's ruthless in business, and he'll be ruthless with you too. Whatever reconciliation fantasy you're entertaining, it won't last. He'll hurt you again. You've lost the right to any opinion about my life, Vivian said, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger running through her. And you certainly don't get to warn me about a man you systematically betrayed. You think you know him, Lawrence persisted, but you only know the version he wanted you to see. Ask him about Valencia Tech. Ask him what happened to the Donovan family after he acquired their company. Ask him. Goodbye, Lawrence. Vivian ended the call, her heart racing. For a moment, she stood on the porch, letting the cool autumn air calm her nerves. Lawrence was desperate, cornered. Of course he would try to drive a wedge between her and Marcus now. It was the same manipulative playbook he'd always used. And yet, a small seed of doubt had been planted. What did she really know about the man Marcus had become in the 5 years they'd been apart? The business world whispered about his ruthlessness, his uncompromising approach to acquisitions. Had the pain of their separation hardened something in him that couldn't be softened again? Shaking off these thoughts, Vivian returned inside to find her mother arranging a tea tray in the kitchen. Lawrence, Josephine asked, reading her daughter's expression with the accuracy of long familiarity. Vivian nodded, trying to save himself as usual. That man would burn down the world to keep himself warm, Josephine muttered, placing delicate china cups on the tray. Don't let him get in your head, baby. Not again. I won't, Vivian promised. Though the echo of Lawrence's warnings lingered, she picked up the tray. Let's check on them. As they approached Zara's bedroom, the sound of laughter, her daughter's high, clear giggles and a deeper, richer chuckle she hadn't heard in years, stopped Vivian in the doorway. The scene before her was both achingly sweet and profoundly surreal. Marcus sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Zara, both of them bent over a collection of rocks and minerals spread across a colorful rug. This one, Marcus was saying, holding up a smooth, dark stone. Looks like it might be magnetite. Do you have a magnet we could test it with? In my science drawer. Zara jumped up and raced to her small desk, pulling open a drawer filled with the collection of odds and ends she used for her constant experiments. She returned with a horseshoe magnet, presenting it to Marcus with the solemn importance of a scientist sharing a crucial tool. Marcus demonstrated how to hold the magnet near the stone without touching it, his large hands gentle as he guided Zara's smaller ones. When the stone leapt to the magnet, Zara's eyes widened with delight. It's magic, she exclaimed. It's science, Marcus corrected gently, which is even better than magic because you can understand how it works. The words, so characteristic of the Marcus that Vivian had loved, who found wonder in knowledge rather than mystery, created a sharp pang in her chest. This was the father Zara should have had all along. The father who would have nurtured her curiosity, challenged her mind, shown her that the world was full of marvels waiting to be understood. As if sensing her presence, Marcus looked up, his eyes meeting Vivian's over their daughter's head. The naked emotion in his gaze, gratitude, regret, a desperate hunger for the time he'd lost, was almost too much to bear. Tea time, Josephine announced, breaking the moment. And I believe I smell rain-soaked little girl who needs to change into dry clothes before catching cold. I don't catch colds, Grandma, Zara protested, though she obediently began gathering her rocks. My immune system is very strong. Ms. Wilson says so. Nevertheless, Josephine replied with the gentle firmness that had guided generations of Montgomery women. Dry clothes first, then tea and cookies with our guest. As Josephine ushered Zara toward the bathroom, Vivian set the tea tray on the small table in the corner of the room. Marcus rose from the floor, his movements slightly stiff from the unaccustomed position. She's extraordinary, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. So bright, so herself. She is, Vivian agreed, arranging cups with hands that weren't quite steady. She always has been. Even as a baby, she had this certainty about her. This sense that the world was exactly as it should be, and she was exactly where she belonged in it. Like you, Marcus observed. That same quiet confidence. Vivian looked up, surprised by the observation. I always thought she got that from you. Your focus. Your determination. A shadow crossed Marcus's face. Let's hope that's all she inherited from me. Before Vivian could respond, Zara returned in dry clothes, her curls still damp but neatly combed, her face shining with the excitement of unexpected company. She climbed onto the window seat beside the table, patting the space next to her as she looked expectantly at Marcus. Sit here, she commanded. I want to show you my constellation book after tea. Marcus complied, his large frame looking almost comically oversized next to Zara's delicate one. As Josephine poured tea and distributed cookies, Vivian was struck by the tableau they created, the four of them sharing this ordinary moment as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if there weren't 5 years of absence and pain between them. Mr. Marcus, Zara said, dunking her cookie in her tea with methodical precision. Do you build real towers like in Mommy's stories? Marcus glanced at Vivian, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to answer truthfully. I do, he said. My company builds software, computer programs that help people connect with each other all over the world. Our headquarters is in a tower downtown, 28 stories high. That's a lot, Zara said, impressed. Can I see it sometime? The innocent question hung in the air, laden with implications about future visits, ongoing connections, a relationship extending beyond this single afternoon. Marcus looked to Vivian again, clearly unwilling to make promises he might not be able to keep. We'll see, Vivian said gently. Mr. Marcus is a very busy man. Not too busy for this, Marcus said quietly, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. Not anymore. The moment was interrupted by Josephine rising from her chair. I believe I'll head home now. Those book club ladies will be at my house in an hour, and I haven't even looked at this month's selection. She bent to kiss Zara's forehead. Be good for your mama, sunshine. I'll see you on Saturday for our baking day. We're making apple pie, Zara informed Marcus solemnly, with cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice. Sounds delicious, Marcus replied with equal seriousness. I've always believed that baking is just chemistry you can eat. Zara's eyes lit up at this perspective. That's what I tell Mommy, but she says it's art. It can be both, Vivian interjected, rising to walk her mother to the door. The best things usually are. At the front door, Josephine embraced her daughter tightly. Call me later, she murmured. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I know, Mama, Vivian whispered back. Thank you. As the door closed behind her mother, Vivian leaned against it for a moment, gathering her strength for whatever came next. The sound of Zara's excited voice drifted from her bedroom, punctuated by Marcus's deeper responses. They were looking at her astronomy book now, Vivian guessed, Zara showing off her knowledge of constellations and planets, another passion she shared with the father she was just beginning to know. If you believe that a woman's strength is revealed not in how she falls but in how she rises, share this video with a sister who needs to be reminded of her resilience today. 5 years ago, the evidence, when Lawrence finally presented it, had been devastating in its apparent completeness. Photographs of Vivian entering Richard Harlow's apartment building late at night, her face partially obscured but recognizable. Text messages between them discussing meeting times and places, with phrases that could be read as innocent business discussions or something far more intimate. Hotel receipts showing Richard had booked rooms on days when Vivian had told Marcus she was visiting design sites in Savannah. "I didn't want to believe it either," Lawrence had said, his expression a perfect mask of reluctant concern as he spread the documents across Marcus's desk. "That's why I waited until I was absolutely sure. Until there was no other explanation." Marcus had stared at the evidence, his world collapsing around him. Richard Harlow had been his friend since college, one of the few people who had known him before success, who had believed in his vision when everyone else called him delusional. And Vivian, his brilliant, beautiful wife, carrying their child, the woman he had trusted with every part of himself. How could she betray him like this? "There has to be another explanation," he'd said, his voice hollow even to his own ears. Lawrence had placed a hand on his shoulder, the picture of brotherly support. "I wish there was, but I've been watching them for weeks, ever since I first suspected. The timing matches, Marcus. The days she says she's working late, the weekends you're traveling. And now," he gestured to a final document, a medical record. "The baby." Marcus had picked up the paper with numb fingers. It appeared to be a paternity test, showing a genetic incompatibility between him and the child Vivian was carrying. "This can't be real," he'd whispered. "I paid a lab tech at her obstetrician's office," Lawrence admitted. "It was the only way to be sure. I know it's wrong, but I had to protect you." The final piece of Lawrence's elaborate deception had been the most cruel and the most effective, because it played directly into Marcus's deepest fear, that he wasn't meant to have the family he'd never had growing up. That happiness, real lasting happiness, wasn't in the cards for boys from Southside Atlanta, no matter how far they climbed. He'd confronted Richard first, storming into his office without warning. The CFO's genuine confusion and vehement denials had only angered Marcus further, exactly as Lawrence had predicted. "Of course he'll deny it," Lawrence had warned. "He stands to lose everything, his job, his reputation, his friendship with you, and he'll try to turn it back on me, claim I'm lying to drive a wedge between you. That's what guilty people do." When Richard had indeed suggested Lawrence might be manipulating the situation, Marcus had fired him on the spot, ignoring the stunned hurt in the eyes of a man who had stood beside him for 15 years. Then he'd gone home to confront Vivian. She'd been in the nursery when he arrived, arranging stuffed animals in the crib they'd chosen together. 7 months pregnant, she'd never looked more beautiful to him, her skin glowing, her body gracefully accommodating their growing child. The sight of her had nearly broken his resolve. "Marcus!" she'd exclaimed, surprised to see him home in the middle of the day. "I thought you had meetings all afternoon." Then, noting his expression, "What's wrong? Has something happened?" "You could say that," he'd replied, his voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside him. "I know, Vivian." She tilted her head, confused. "Know what? About you and Richard. About the baby." He gestured toward her rounded belly. "About the fact that it isn't mine." The color had drained from Vivian's face. "What are you talking about? Of course this is your baby. Richard and I are colleagues, nothing more." "Don't." Marcus had held up a hand, unable to bear what he perceived as continued deception. "I have proof. Photos, messages, even a paternity test." "A paternity test?" Vivian had echoed, genuine bewilderment in her voice. "That's impossible. I never." "Lawrence has been watching you for weeks," Marcus interrupted. "He didn't want to tell me, tried to convince himself he was wrong. But the evidence is irrefutable." Understanding had dawned in Vivian's eyes then. "Lawrence," she'd repeated, her voice hardening. "Of course, Marcus, whatever he's shown you is a lie. He's manipulating you. Can't you see that? He's always been jealous of our relationship, of the fact that you have a life that doesn't revolve around him." But Marcus, primed by Lawrence to expect exactly this defense, had shaken his head. I've seen the evidence with my own eyes, Vivian. Photos don't lie. Photos can be doctored. Texts can be faked. Whatever paternity test he's shown you is a complete fabrication. Vivian had moved toward him, her hands outstretched. Marcus, think about this. We've been trying for a baby for 2 years. We saw the fertility specialists together. You were there when we found out I was pregnant. How could this possibly be anyone's child but yours? For a moment, doubt had flickered in Marcus's mind. What she was saying made logical sense. But the images Lawrence had shown him kept flashing before his eyes. Vivian entering Richard's building, her face turned away as if hiding her identity. The medical report with its damning conclusion. I want to believe you, he'd said, his voice breaking. But the evidence. Forget the evidence. Vivian had cried, real anger flaring now. Look at me, Marcus. Your wife. The woman who has stood beside you for 8 years. Am I lying to you now? He had looked at her then, really looked. At the woman he'd built his life with, the mother of the child he'd wanted so desperately. And for a heartbeat he'd almost believed her. Almost. But then Lawrence's voice had echoed in his mind. She'll deny everything. She'll make you doubt yourself. That's what liars do. I can't do this, Marcus had said finally, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing his wedding band. With deliberate movements, he'd placed it on the marble countertop, the soft clink of metal on stone like a period at the end of a sentence. I know what you did. Don't bother denying it. Marcus, please. Vivian had begged, tears streaming down her face now. Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built on Lawrence's lies. At least investigate before you make a decision you can't take back. But he had already been walking toward the door, his back rigid, his heart shattering with every step. My lawyers will be in touch about the divorce. You can keep the house. I'll provide financial support, but I want nothing to do with you or that child. Marcus. Vivian's voice had broken on his name, a sound of such raw pain that he'd almost turned back. Almost. Don't leave like this. Please. But he had kept walking, out the door and into the waiting car, away from the life he'd believed in, the future he'd planned, the family he'd wanted more than anything in the world. It was the last time he'd seen her until today. Present day. Vivian returned to Zara's bedroom to find her daughter had fallen asleep against Marcus's side, the constellation book open on her lap. The sight was so domestic, so achingly normal, that for a moment Vivian could almost pretend the last 5 years hadn't happened, that this was just another evening in the life they should have shared. Marcus looked up as she entered, his expression a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. She was explaining the difference between red giants and white dwarfs, he said softly, and then she just drifted off mid-sentence. She does that, Vivian replied, moving to lift the sleeping child. Burns so bright and then crashes all at once. Let me, Marcus offered, carefully gathering Zara into his arms. The little girl stirred but didn't wake, instinctively nestling against his chest as if she somehow recognized the safety there. Where should I? This way. Vivian led him to Zara's bed, already turned down for the night. Together, they tucked her in, Marcus's movements tentative but tender as he arranged the blankets around her small form. For a moment, they both stood watching their daughter sleep, the rise and fall of her chest, the slight flutter of her eyelashes against her cheeks. Then, by unspoken agreement, they retreated to the living room, closing Zara's door softly behind them. In the more formal space, the tension between them returned, the easy connection they'd shared in Zara's presence giving way to the reality of all that remained unresolved. She's amazing with you, Vivian said, breaking the silence. Usually she's shy with strangers. I'm not a stranger, Marcus replied quietly. Not really, thanks to your stories. Vivian moved to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked street. I never wanted her to hate you. Whatever happened between us, you're her father. She deserves to know. She deserves to know where she comes from, who she comes from. Vivian turned back to face him. Even when I was angriest, I knew that much. Marcus sank onto the couch, the emotional weight of the day evident in the slump of his shoulders. I don't deserve your consideration. Not after what I did. No. Vivian agreed, her voice gentle but firm. You don't. But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what Zara deserves. A silence fell between them, filled with the soft patter of rain against the windows and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock that had witnessed so much of their shared history. Lawrence called me, Vivian finally said. Just now on the porch. Marcus's head snapped up, his expression hardening. What did he want? To warn me against you, ironically enough. She moved to sit in the armchair across from him. He seems to think you're going to destroy him. I am, Marcus confirmed, no apology in his tone. He's already been removed from the company. His accounts are frozen pending an investigation into the embezzlement. And once that's complete, I intend to press charges. Vivian studied him, noting the cold determination in his eyes, so different from the vulnerability he'd shown earlier. That's not the Marcus I knew. The Marcus you knew died the day he walked out on his pregnant wife, he replied, his voice low and controlled. What Lawrence did to us, there's no forgiveness for that, Vivian. Not this time. He's your brother, she said softly. Your only family. Marcus's gaze moved to Zara's closed bedroom door, then back to Vivian. No, he's not. The implication hung between them, fragile and uncertain. Before Vivian could respond, Marcus continued, his voice taking on an urgency she remembered from their early days together, when he would stay up all night explaining his vision for changing the world through technology. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, he said. No right to expect a place in your life or in Zara's. But I'm asking anyway. He leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. Let me know her, Vivian. Let me be her father. Not just today, but going forward. I've missed 5 years I can never get back. I don't want to miss another day. The raw honesty in his plea touched something deep inside Vivian, a place that had remained tender despite her best efforts to harden it. For all her justified anger, she had never wanted to keep Zara from her father. She had sent birth announcements, photographs, milestone updates to his office, his homes, even through his attorney. All returned unopened. You walked away once, she said, voicing her deepest fear. What happens when things get complicated again? When Lawrence or someone else plants doubts? Will you walk away a second time? Never, Marcus said with quiet intensity. I've learned my lesson in the most painful way possible. Whatever relationship we have or don't have going forward, I will never abandon Zara again. You have my word. Vivian wanted to believe him. The Marcus she had married had been many things. Driven, sometimes distant, occasionally arrogant, but never a liar. His word had been his bond in business and in their marriage, until the day it wasn't. I need time, she said finally. This is a lot to process. For both of us. Marcus nodded, accepting her terms. Of course, whatever you need. He hesitated, then added, There's something else you should know. About Lawrence. What is it? The embezzlement wasn't his first betrayal. Marcus's expression darkened. After I left you, I threw myself into work, expanded internationally, and Lawrence was right there, playing the supportive brother, gradually working his way into positions of influence in my companies. Until you discovered what he was doing, Vivian supplied. Yes, but it was more than just the money. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of agitation she remembered well. He was sabotaging projects, undermining key relationships, creating conflicts between team members, all while presenting himself as the peacemaker, the one holding everything together. Why? Vivian asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Control, Marcus said simply. As long as I was in crisis, as long as I needed him, he had power. The same reason he destroyed our marriage. The pieces clicked into place for Vivian. Lawrence's desperate phone call, his warnings about Marcus's ruthlessness. He's afraid you'll do to him what he did to us. With good reason, Marcus acknowledged. The difference is, he deserves it. Before Vivian could respond, her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it, then back at Marcus. It's getting late. I should check on Zara and start thinking about dinner. Marcus rose immediately, understanding the gentle dismissal. Of course, I've imposed on your time enough for one day. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it on the coffee table. My personal number. When you're ready to talk again. If you're ready, I'll be available. Day or night. Vivian nodded, rising to walk him to the door. As they stood in the entryway, the physical space between them seemed to shrink, charged with the memory of what they had been to each other and the uncertainty of what they might become. Thank you, Marcus said quietly, for letting me meet her, for the stories you've told her, for not poisoning her against me when you had every right to. She makes her own judgments, Vivian replied. Always has, just like her father. A ghost of a smile touched Marcus's lips. Let's hope she has better judgment than I've shown. He turned to go, then paused, his hand on the doorknob. Vivian, I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked evening like a figure from one of the stories she told Zara. The boy who built towers that touched the sky, who lost everything that mattered, who had to find his way back to what truly made him rich. Closing the door, Vivian leaned against it, her emotions too complex to name. Anger and relief, hope and fear, the lingering ache of old wounds and the tentative possibility of healing. All swirled within her like colors in a kaleidoscope, forming patterns she couldn't quite interpret. A soft sound from Zara's room pulled her from her thoughts. Moving quietly down the hall, she found her daughter sitting up in bed, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Where's Mr. Marcus? Zara asked, her voice still fuzzy with sleep. He had to go home, sweetheart, Vivian said, sitting on the edge of the bed and smoothing Zara's wild curls. But he said to tell you how much he enjoyed meeting you. Zara nodded, processing this information with her usual seriousness. He's nice, and he knows a lot about rocks and stars. She looked up at her mother, her gray eyes, so like Marcus's, wide and questioning. Is he going to come back? The simple question carried so much weight, so many implications. Vivian chose her words carefully. Would you like him to? Yes, Zara said without hesitation. He feels familiar, like I already know him. Out of the mouths of babes, Vivian thought, her heart constricting. We'll see, baby. It's complicated. Grown-ups always say that, Zara observed with the wisdom of her 4 years. But sometimes things are only complicated because you make them that way. Vivian laughed softly, struck by the simple truth in her daughter's words. When did you get so smart? I was born this way, Zara replied matter-of-factly, then yawned widely. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Spaghetti it is, Vivian agreed, grateful for the shift to more mundane concerns. Rest a little longer while I start cooking. As she prepared dinner, Vivian's mind kept returning to Marcus's parting words. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Were they true? And if they were, did it matter after everything that had happened? 5 years was a long time. They were different people now. She had built a life without him, a successful business, a home for herself and Zara. She had dated occasionally, though never seriously. No one had ever measured up to the connection she'd shared with Marcus, a fact that both frustrated and relieved her. And Marcus? What kind of man had he become in their years apart? The business world spoke of his increased ruthlessness, his uncompromising approach to acquisitions and competitors. Lawrence had warned her about Valencia Tech, about the Donovan family. What had happened there? And did it change how she should view his return to their lives? As she stirred the spaghetti sauce, Vivian realized there was only one way to answer these questions. She needed to investigate for herself, to learn who Marcus Blackwood had become before she could decide whether to let him back into their lives. If this story of redemption and second chances touched your heart, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more powerful stories that remind us it's never too late to heal old wounds. The next morning, after dropping Zara at preschool, Vivian drove to the gleaming tower in downtown Atlanta that housed Blackwood Technologies headquarters. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't used the business card Marcus had left. This wasn't about their personal relationship, at least not directly. This was about understanding the man who wanted to be part of their daughter's life. The receptionist in the soaring lobby recognized her immediately, a reminder of how closely her life had once been tied to this company. "Ms. Montgomery, it's been years. Are you here to see Mr. Blackwood?" "Not exactly," Vivian replied with a warm smile. "I was hoping to speak with Diane Winters if she's available." Diane had been Marcus's executive assistant since the early days of the company, a formidable woman who knew more about the inner workings of Blackwood Technologies than anyone except Marcus himself. She had also been one of the few people who had reached out to Vivian after the separation, sending a simple card that read, "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. D." 10 minutes later, Vivian was being ushered into Diane's office, a sleek space with views of the Atlanta skyline. The older woman rose from behind her desk, her professional demeanor giving way to genuine warmth as she embraced Vivian. "It's about time," Diane said, stepping back to study her. "You look wonderful. Motherhood agrees with you." "It does," Vivian agreed, taking the seat Diane offered. "Though it's not without its challenges." "I can imagine." Diane returned to her chair, her shrewd eyes assessing. "I assume this visit has something to do with Marcus showing up at your door yesterday?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast. He canceled every meeting on his calendar for the afternoon. Came back looking like he'd seen a ghost, or found one." Diane leaned forward, her expression softening. "He told me about your daughter, Zara. Beautiful name." "Thank you." Vivian hesitated, then decided on directness. "I need to know who he is now, Diane. What kind of man he's become, before I can decide whether to let him into Zara's life." Diane nodded, understanding immediately. "You want to know about Valencia Tech, about the Donovans." Vivian's surprise must have shown on her face, because Diane smiled slightly. "Lawrence called you, didn't he? Tried to paint Marcus as some kind of corporate monster." "Something like that," Vivian admitted. "Is there truth to it?" Diane considered the question, her expression thoughtful. "Marcus has changed since you left, hardened in some ways. The man who walked out of your house 5 years ago was devastated, Vivian. Believed he'd lost everything that mattered. The man who returned was focused, driven in a way that sometimes bordered on obsession. And Valencia Tech? A hostile takeover, yes, but not the way Lawrence would have you believe." Diane opened a drawer and withdrew a file, sliding it across the desk. "Marcus acquired Valencia because their CEO, James Donovan, was systematically stealing from his employees' pension fund, using the money to cover personal gambling debts." Vivian opened the file, scanning the documents inside, financial records, investigative reports, court filings. "I had no idea. Few people do. Marcus kept it quiet to protect the employees from further trauma. He restructured the company, restored the pension fund from his personal accounts, and offered James Donovan a choice: resign quietly or face criminal charges. That doesn't sound like the ruthless destroyer Lawrence described." "Marcus can be ruthless," Diane acknowledged, "but there's always a line he won't cross. Always a principle at stake." She paused, studying Vivian. "The hardest part for him after you left was believing he'd failed at the one thing that mattered most to him, family. Changed him, Vivian. Made him more cautious in some ways, more reckless in others." "And Lawrence? Did Marcus suspect anything before yesterday?" Diane's expression hardened. "We all did. Lawrence has been sabotaging this company for years, undermining Marcus at every turn while playing the devoted brother. The embezzlement was just the final straw." "Why didn't anyone say anything?" "We tried. But Lawrence had positioned himself as Marcus's protector, the only one who truly had his best interests at heart. Anyone who questioned Lawrence's motives became an enemy." Diane shook her head. "It was masterfully done. I'll give him that. A perfect isolation technique." Vivian absorbed this information, her mind racing. The picture emerging was complex, A Marcus who had indeed hardened, but whose core values remained intact. A man who had been manipulated and isolated by the brother he trusted, just as he had been 5 years ago. "There's something else you should know," Diane said, her voice gentler now. "About the birth announcements, the photos, the updates you sent." Vivian looked up sharply. "He never opened them. They were all returned." "By Lawrence," Diane confirmed. "He intercepted everything. Marcus never knew you tried to contact him about Zara. Never knew you'd reached out at all." The revelation hit Vivian like a physical blow. All these years, she'd believed Marcus had deliberately rejected their child, had chosen to remain ignorant of her existence. To learn that this, too, had been Lawrence's manipulation. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because you deserve the truth," Diane replied simply. "All of it. And because I've watched Marcus Blackwood build an empire while his personal life crumbled to dust. Whatever you decide about your future, about Zara's relationship with her father, you should do it with clear eyes." Vivian nodded, gathering the file and rising to leave. At the door, she turned back. "Thank you, Diane, for everything." "Just one more thing," Diane said, her expression serious. "Be careful with Lawrence. He's cornered now, and that makes him dangerous. He won't go down without trying to take others with him." The warning followed Vivian as she left the building, stepping into the bright autumn sunshine that belied the emotional storm within her. The Marcus that Diane had described was both familiar and strange. The principled man she had loved, hardened by pain but not fundamentally changed. A man who had been as thoroughly deceived as she had been. As she walked to her car, her phone rang. Glancing at the screen, she saw it was her assistant from Montgomery Design. "Vivian, I'm so sorry to bother you during your personal day," Amara began, her voice tense. "But there's someone here insisting on seeing you. He's quite persistent." A chill ran down Vivian's spine. "Who is it?" "Lawrence Blackwood. He says it's urgent, that it concerns your daughter." "I'm on my way," Vivian said, her voice sharp with sudden fear. "Don't let him leave. And call building security to keep an eye on him until I get there." The drive to Montgomery Design's offices in Buckhead took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. What could Lawrence possibly want with her business? And why mention Zara? The thought of him using her daughter's name, even speaking of her, filled Vivian with a cold rage that surprised her with its intensity. When she arrived, she found Lawrence pacing the reception area, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. Designer suit wrinkled, hair uncombed, eyes bloodshot. He looked up as she entered, relief washing over his features. "Vivian, thank God. I've been trying to reach you." "My office," she cut him off, unwilling to create a scene in front of her employees. "Now." Lawrence followed her down the hallway, past curious staff members trying to appear busy while obviously straining to overhear. Once inside her office, Vivian closed the door and turned to face the man who had destroyed her marriage. "You have exactly 2 minutes to explain why you're here and why you dared to mention my daughter," she said, her voice glacial. "And then you're leaving, one way or another." Lawrence ran a hand through his disheveled hair, his usual smooth charm nowhere in evidence. "Marcus is going to destroy me, Vivian. He's frozen my accounts, locked me out of the company, threatened criminal charges. I have nothing left. And this concerns me how?" Vivian remained standing, making no move to offer him a seat. "Because you can stop him," Lawrence said, desperation evident in every word. "He'll listen to you. If you tell him to back off, to give me another chance." "Why would I do that?" Vivian interrupted, incredulous. "After what you did to us, you destroyed my marriage. You robbed my daughter of her father for 5 years. You manipulated and betrayed your own brother. Give me one good reason why I should help you." Lawrence's expression shifted, the desperation giving way to something colder, more calculated. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure Marcus never sees Zara again." The threat hung in the air between them, so unexpected and vicious that for a moment Vivian couldn't speak. When she found her voice, it was deadly quiet. "What did you just say to me?" I have connections at family court, Lawrence continued, seemingly oblivious to the danger in her tone. I can file reports questioning your fitness as a mother. I can create evidence of neglect, of instability. By the time I'm finished, you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation. The way you created evidence of my affair with Richard? Vivian asked, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. The way you fabricated a paternity test? Lawrence shrugged, a hint of his old arrogance returning. It worked once. Get out of my office, Vivian said, each word precise and controlled. Get out before I call security. Before I call the police. You're not hearing me, Lawrence insisted, taking a step toward her. I'm not asking anymore, Vivian. Either you convince Marcus to back off, or I will make sure. He never finished the sentence. The office door opened, and Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression a mask of cold fury as he took in the scene before him. I thought I might find you here, he said to Lawrence, his voice deceptively calm. When you weren't at your apartment or any of your usual haunts. Lawrence paled, taking an involuntary step back. Marcus, I was just threatening the mother of my child? Marcus suggested, entering the office and closing the door behind him. Yes, I heard. The entire office heard, in fact. You never did learn to modulate your voice when you're desperate. Vivian looked between the brothers, the physical resemblance striking despite their different states. Marcus immaculate in a tailored suit, radiating controlled power. Lawrence disheveled and frantic, his usual polish completely eroded by fear. How did you know he was here? She asked Marcus. Diane called me after you left, he explained, his eyes never leaving Lawrence. She was concerned about exactly this scenario. I was on my way to warn you when your assistant called my office. Lawrence's gaze darted between them, the calculation visible in his expression. So you two are back together already? That was fast. Does she know about Valencia Tech, Marcus? About what you did to the Donovans? She knows everything, Marcus replied evenly. Unlike you, I don't build relationships on lies. A bitter laugh escaped Lawrence. That's rich coming from you, the great Marcus Blackwood, who walked out on his pregnant wife without even giving her a chance to defend herself, who abandoned his own child for 5 years. And now you're what, the wronged party? The victim? No, Marcus said quietly. I'm not a victim. I made choices based on what I believed was true. I'll live with the consequences of those choices for the rest of my life. He took a step closer to his brother. But you, Lawrence, you deliberately destroyed lives for your own gain. You manipulated and betrayed the only family you had. And now you're threatening a woman and child who never did anything to harm you. Lawrence's expression hardened, the last vestiges of his charm falling away to reveal the bitter envy beneath. You had everything, he spat. The success, the perfect wife, the child on the way. What was I supposed to do? Stand in your shadow forever? Watch you build the perfect family while I got your leftovers, your charity. I would have given you anything, Marcus said, and for the first time, real pain broke through his controlled exterior. Anything you asked for. You were my brother, the only family I had left. All you had to do was ask. I didn't want your handouts, Lawrence shouted. I wanted what you had. I wanted to matter. The raw truth of the confession seemed to shock even Lawrence himself. He fell silent, his breathing ragged, his hands clenched at his sides. Vivian, watching this exchange, felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at Lawrence's manipulation, pity for his obvious pain, and a growing understanding of the damaged relationship that had ultimately destroyed her marriage. You need help, Lawrence, she said finally, her voice gentler than she'd intended. Professional help. Not revenge, not threats. Actual help. Lawrence looked at her, surprise evident in his expression. Why would you care what happens to me? I don't particularly, Vivian admitted. But Zara deserves to know her uncle someday. The real person. Not this bitter, manipulative version of yourself you've become. Marcus glanced at her, surprise and something like hope flickering in his eyes before he turned back to his brother. "This is your one chance, Lawrence. Take it or leave it. I'll drop the criminal charges if you agree to 3 conditions. Complete financial restitution for the embezzlement, intensive therapy, and a legally binding agreement to stay away from Vivian and Zara until, if ever, they choose to have contact with you." Lawrence stared at his brother, clearly searching for the trap. "And if I refuse? Then I'll press charges for the embezzlement," Marcus said simply. "And now, thanks to your performance here today, for criminal threatening as well. Your choice." For a long moment, the brothers stared at each other, years of complicated history passing between them. Then Lawrence's shoulders slumped, the fight visibly draining out of him. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll take the deal." "Good." Marcus nodded to the door. "My car is outside. My lawyer is waiting at the office with the paperwork. We'll do this now." Lawrence moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at Vivian. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not for separating you from Marcus, he never deserved you. But for involving you and your daughter in this. That was beneath me." It wasn't a real apology, not really. But it was perhaps the closest thing to honesty Lawrence Blackwood was capable of in that moment. Vivian acknowledged it with a slight nod, neither accepting nor rejecting the half-hearted olive branch. As Lawrence left the office, Marcus turned to Vivian, concern evident in his expression. "Are you all right? Did he threaten you before I arrived?" "I'm fine," she assured him, "though I'm not sure my staff will recover from all this drama anytime soon." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How did you know to come here?" "When Diane told me Lawrence was missing and likely desperate, I tried to think where he might go, who he might target." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of agitation she remembered well. "I called your home first, then your mother's. When I couldn't reach you, I called your office. Your assistant told me what was happening." Vivian nodded, processing this. "I was at your office, actually, speaking with Diane." Surprise flickered across Marcus's features. "About you," Vivian said simply. "I needed to understand who you've become before I could decide about Zara. About us." Marcus absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "And did you understand?" "I'm beginning to," Vivian admitted. She gestured to the visitor's chair across from her desk. "You should go. Lawrence is waiting." "Lawrence can wait," Marcus replied, though he took the offered seat. "This is more important." The simple statement, "this is more important," hung between them, weighted with meaning. How different things might have been 5 years ago if Marcus had made the same choice, had put their relationship above his brother's manipulations. "I went to Valencia Tech," Vivian said, watching his reaction carefully. "After we separated. They were bidding on a design contract for their new headquarters." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "I didn't know that. I met James Donovan. Saw firsthand how he treated his employees, the corners he cut, the promises he broke." She leaned forward, holding his gaze. "When you acquired the company, when you replaced him, I assumed it was just business. Another hostile takeover by Marcus Blackwood." "It wasn't," Marcus said quietly. "I know that now. Diane showed me the file." Vivian's expression softened slightly. "You saved those people's pensions, their livelihoods. And you did it quietly, without taking credit." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It was the right thing to do." "Yes, it was." Vivian studied him, seeing both the man she had married and the stranger he had become in their years apart. "You've changed, Marcus. We both have. For better or worse?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. "Both, I think," Vivian replied honestly. "I'm stronger now, more independent. I've built a life I'm proud of, a business that fulfills me. And you?" She paused, considering. "You're harder in some ways, more decisive, less willing to compromise. But the core is the same," Marcus said, his voice low and intent. "The things that matter most to me haven't changed, Vivian. If anything, losing you, losing the family we should have had, only clarified what truly matters." The sincerity in his words touched something deep inside her, a place that had remained tender despite her best efforts to harden it. For all her justified anger, for all the pain of the past 5 years, she couldn't deny the connection that still existed between them. Complicated, damaged, but undeniably real. "Zara asked about you this morning," she said, changing the subject slightly. "Wanted to know when you're coming back." Hope flared in Marcus's eyes. "What did you tell her?" "That it's complicated." Vivian smiled slightly at the memory. "She informed me that grown-ups only say that when they're making things more difficult than they need to be." A genuine laugh escaped Marcus, the sound warming the space between them. "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes," Vivian agreed. She hesitated, then made a decision. "Would you like to come to dinner tomorrow night? Nothing formal, just spaghetti and garlic bread. Zara's favorite." The invitation hung between them, simple yet profound in its implications. Marcus studied her face, clearly searching for any sign of reluctance or obligation. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "I don't want to rush this, Vivian, to pressure you in any way." "I'm not sure of anything," she admitted with a small smile, "except that our daughter wants to show you her constellation book properly, without falling asleep halfway through. And that maybe it's time we both stopped making things more complicated than they need to be." Marcus nodded, understanding the boundaries of the invitation, a step forward, but a measured one. A chance for their daughter to know her father, and perhaps, eventually, for them to rediscover what had been lost. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Thank you." As he rose to leave, to deal with the waiting Lawrence and all the complications that entailed, Vivian found herself speaking again, voicing the question that had lingered since his revelation the day before. "Why didn't you just ask me?" The words were soft, but they stopped Marcus in his tracks. "After 8 years together, how could you believe I would betray you like that without even giving me a chance to defend myself?" Marcus turned back, his expression raw with regret. "Because I was a fool," he said, echoing his words from the day before. "A proud, insecure fool who let his brother play on his deepest fears." He shook his head. "There's no excuse, Vivian. I failed you in the most fundamental way possible. I failed to trust you." The honesty in his admission, the complete absence of justification or defense, touched Vivian deeply. This was the man she had married, flawed, sometimes proud, but ultimately honest about his failings. "Trust is earned," she said quietly. "If we're going to have any kind of relationship going forward, even just as Zara's parents, we need to rebuild that. Slowly, carefully." "I understand," Marcus replied, his gaze steady on hers. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes, for as long as it takes. You and Zara are worth it." As he left her office, Vivian remained seated, the emotional weight of the past 2 days settling around her like a heavy cloak. So much had happened, so much had been revealed. The truth about Lawrence's betrayal, the reality of Marcus's continued feelings for her, the possibility of a future that included both parents for Zara. It was too much to process all at once, too complex to reduce to simple decisions or clear paths forward. But for the first time in 5 years, Vivian felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Not just for Zara to know her father, but for herself to heal the wounds that had shaped her life since Marcus walked away. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, could not be instantly restored. Love, once betrayed, could not simply resume as if nothing had happened. But perhaps, with time and truth and the unifying love they both felt for their daughter, something new could grow from the ashes of what had been lost. Vivian reached for her phone, scrolling to the photos she had taken that morning before dropping Zara at preschool. Her daughter beaming in a new dress, excited about show and tell. With only a moment's hesitation, she sent the image to the number on Marcus's business card, adding a simple message: "Looking forward to dinner tomorrow, 6 p.m. V." The response came almost immediately: "So am I. More than I can say." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't reconciliation or promises of forever. But it was a beginning, a small step toward healing, toward truth, toward the family that might have been and perhaps someday still could be. As Vivian turned back to her work, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter somehow. 5 years ago, a lie had torn apart everything she believed in. Today, the truth had opened a door she had thought forever closed. What lay beyond that door remained to be seen, but for the first time in a very long time, Vivian Montgomery was ready to find out. My beautiful queens, isn't it amazing how life's most painful moments can sometimes lead us to our greatest strength? When Marcus walked away from Vivian, he didn't just break her heart. He forced her to discover a resilience she never knew she possessed. She built a business. She raised a daughter. She created a life filled with purpose and dignity. And when the truth finally emerged, she faced it not as a victim seeking revenge, but as a woman of wisdom weighing what was best for her child and her own heart. That's the kind of strength that defines us as women, not the absence of pain, but what we choose to build from its ashes. Remember this, my sisters. Sometimes the longest journeys bring us right back to where we started, but with new eyes to see what was always there. Whether your path leads to reconciliation like Vivian's might, or to a completely new beginning, trust that you have everything you need to rise, to rebuild, and to reclaim the joy that is rightfully yours. If the story touched your heart today, remember that your own story is still being written. Every chapter, even the painful ones, is shaping you into the magnificent woman you're becoming. And that, my queens, is a beautiful thing. Sometimes life's greatest betrayals become our most powerful teachers. They show us who we truly are when everything we thought we knew comes crashing down. Vivian could have let bitterness consume her when Marcus walked away, but instead, she channeled that pain into building something beautiful. A thriving business, a loving home for her daughter, and most importantly, an unshakable sense of her own worth. And when Marcus returned, she faced him not with the weakness of someone desperate to reclaim the past, but with the strength of a woman who knows her value. That's the kind of resilience I wish for each of you watching today. Whether you're in the middle of your storm right now or healing from wounds inflicted years ago, know this: you are not defined by who walked away or what was taken from you. You are defined by how magnificently you rise, how compassionately you love, and how courageously you open yourself to truth, even when that truth arrives 5 years later than it should have. I'm Mr. Harrison, and I'll be back next week with another story that reminds us all of the power of a woman's heart to heal, to forgive, and to create beauty from life's most broken places. Until then, hold your head high, queens. Your crown may get heavy sometimes, but you were born to wear it.